Right then, gather round, settle in. What I'm about to tell you isn't some made-up yarn, mind. This is a proper account, shared with me by a chap I know, let's call him Jake, about something quite extraordinary and frankly, rather terrifying, that happened to his friend Ethan. This took place back in, about 2021 over in the States. Ethan, 24 he was at the time, a fine, well-built young man, handsome chap too. He was down in a quiet little town called Springfield, on what you might call a spiritual retreat, staying near a community center, focusing, praying, the whole 9 yards. It was meant to be a 40-day stretch. Now Ethan, for all his good qualities, had a healthy dose of skepticism about the paranormal. Didn't believe in ghosts, spirits, none of that jazz. Thought it was all old wives' tales, vivid imaginations, as his 40 days were drawing to a close, specifically on the night of the 39th day, heading into the 40th. This skepticism gnawed at him. He'd heard whispers about an old cemetery nearby, old Elmwood Cemetery, apparently with a bit of a reputation. See what all the fuss is about. He probably thought, nothing ever happens. People just get themselves worked up. So around 1:30 in the morning, maybe closer to 2, he slipped out. He was wearing dark clothes, looking sharp. Apparently had put on a spot of cologne he was rather fond of. Smelled rather nice, apparently. He strolled through the quiet streets of Springfield, the air cool and still, and made his way to old Elmwood. He got inside, no bother. The place was as silent as a graveyard at night. Pitch black, save for the scant light from the moon or distant street lamps filtering through the trees. He walked about a bit, explored the headstones, felt the silence. Didn't see a thing, didn't hear a peep out of the ordinary. And an old stone bench, sat down, even pulled out his phone and scrolled through social media for a good 45 minutes. Nothing. He huffed, stood up. Bloody rubbish, he muttered to himself. Just like I thought, people making mountains out of molehills. He left old Elmwood, completely underwhelmed, and headed back to the community center, convinced he'd just wasted an hour proving the non-existence of spooks. He finished his retreat the next day and traveled back home to Chicago. Everything seemed perfectly normal. His mother, Sarah, and his older sister, Emily, just the 3 of them at home since their father had passed some years back, were thrilled to see him. Friends came round. Everyone was happy. No lingering effects from his little graveyard excursion, or so it seemed. But that normalcy was frightfully short-lived. After just a couple of days, things started to get peculiar. And it wasn't happening to Ethan. Not directly anyway. It started one night. Emily was up late, maybe 1 or 2 a.m., working on her laptop or just having a bit of a browse. She heard it. A faint, high-pitched sound coming from Ethan's room. Like a baby crying. Distressed, whimpering. She paused, listened. Crikey, she thought. Must be something on his TV, a film or something. She didn't think much more of it and went to bed. The next night, it was Sarah, his mother. Around midnight or 1:30, she was woken by a distinct sound from Ethan's room. An old man coughing. A deep, rattling cough. She lay there for a moment, confused. An old man. In Ethan's room, she got up quietly, crept towards his door, listened. The coughing persisted for a few seconds, then stopped. She gently opened the door a crack. Ethan was fast asleep in his bed. The room was dark and silent now. No TV on, no sound. Just her son, sleeping soundly. She felt a bit silly, closed the door and went back to bed, figuring it was just her imagination playing tricks. Then came the 3rd night. Again Sarah was awake, and again she heard a voice from Ethan's room, but this time it was different. A young woman's voice. Soft, slightly husky, but definitely not Emily's voice. She strained to listen. The voice was murmuring. Sarah edged closer to the door, put her ear against it. She could just make out the words delivered in a sort of mesmerized, adoring tone. "Oh, you're so beautiful. I saw you, and I fell in love instantly. I'm never, ever going to leave you." Sarah's blood ran cold. A girl in Ethan's room, whispering things like that at this hour. But she knew Ethan didn't have anyone over. Not like that. Panic flared, followed by a mother's protective anger. She yanked the door open. Ethan was alone in his bed, fast asleep. The room was empty. Sarah searched every corner, checked under the bed, in the wardrobe. Nothing. Absolutely nobody else there. But she'd heard the voice, clear as day. She was absolutely gobsmacked, couldn't make head nor tail of it. She woke Emily. They whispered about it, both unnerved by the strange sounds emanating from Ethan's room night after night. They confronted Ethan the next morning. "Ethan," Sarah said, "we've been hearing things from your room at night. Strange noises, a baby crying, an old man coughing, and last night, a girl talking." Ethan just rolled his eyes. "Oh, come on, Mom, Emily. You're both letting your imaginations run wild. I sleep through the night. I don't hear anything. You must be dreaming or something." He completely dismissed their concerns, but the noises continued, almost nightly now, a macabre rotation of sounds. Then came the shouting. One evening, Emily was again working late on her laptop. Suddenly, a loud, aggressive voice, the old man's voice, roared from Ethan's room. It wasn't a cough this time. It was furious, possessive. Emily froze. She heard the words chillingly clear. "This boy, he's mine. I like this one. He's like my grandson. I'm taking him with me. You others, stay away. Look after yourselves. I love his scent and his face. I'm taking him. I've decided." The sheer dominance and fury in the voice sent shivers down her spine. Emily bolted for Ethan's room. She opened the door cautiously. Ethan was asleep, thrashing slightly perhaps, but definitely asleep. The room was quiet now, the voice gone. But as Emily stepped inside, she noticed a smell, a distinct fragrance, the cologne Ethan had worn when he went to Springfield. The one he usually wore. It filled the room. Puzzled and frightened, she backed out. The next morning, she asked him, "Ethan, did you put on that cologne last night? The one you like?" He frowned. "No, why would I? My bottle ran out just before I left Springfield, remember? Haven't had any since. But your room, it smelled strongly of it last night," Emily insisted, then added, "And I heard that old man's voice again, shouting from your room, saying those things about taking you." Ethan just sighed, frustrated. "Honestly, you two are driving yourselves mad. First Mum hears things, now you hear things. You need to stop this. You're imagining it." "But Mum heard things too," Emily protested. "Right, call her in then," Ethan retorted. So they did. Sarah confirmed she'd heard the noises too, including the baby and the old man coughing. Ethan remained adamant they were mistaken, and told them pointedly not to lurk around his room at night. Things went on like this for another couple of days. Restless nights for Sarah and Emily. Strange sounds from Ethan's room. Ethan's continued denial. Then came the night that changed everything. Emily was up working again. Around 2 or 2:30 in the morning, she heard it. A soft melodic sound. Humming. A girl humming a gentle, tuneless melody from Ethan's room. It was faint at first, but distinctly audible. This time, Emily didn't dismiss it. She nudged her mother awake. "Mom," she whispered urgently. "Wake up! It's happening again! The girl's voice, humming, from Ethan's room!" Sarah, tired but instantly alert, listened. Yes, there it was. Faint, ethereal humming. They crept towards Ethan's room together. As they got closer, the humming became clearer, though still soft. This time, they didn't open the door immediately. Ethan's room had a window that faced the hallway just right. They edged towards it, peering through a gap in the curtains. What they saw sent chills right down to their very bones. They nearly cried out but clamped their hands over their mouths. There was Ethan sitting on a small chair pulled up to a desk that had a mirror on it. He wasn't asleep. He was awake, but something was dreadfully wrong. He had his eyes closed, a strange, serene expression on his face, and with his hands, which were short, his own hands, he was making the motions of combing very long, flowing hair, pulling his fingers through the air downwards, flicking the imaginary ends, just like a woman with long hair would do. And all the while he was humming that soft, unsettling melody. Sarah and Emily stared, horrified, frozen to the spot. The pieces clicked into place with a sickening jolt. The different voices, the strange behavior. It wasn't their imagination. Something was in him, watching him mimic combing long hair like that. Hearing the humming from his own mouth was utterly terrifying. They backed away silently, crept back to Sarah's room, and huddled together in bed. Sleeping alone was simply not an option that night. The next morning, they didn't tell Ethan what they'd seen. They were too frightened, too confused. But before they could even decide what to do, Ethan's health took a nosedive. He woke up with a raging fever, shivering uncontrollably, terribly weak. They rushed him to the doctor, who prescribed medication, but it did absolutely nothing. Over the next 2 or 3 days, he only got worse, weaker, fever higher. The doctor was baffled and recommended hospitalization. In the hospital, things escalated rapidly. Ethan's behavior became erratic, frightening. He was confined to a private room, but he was difficult. He'd be rude to the nurses, glare at the doctors. When a doctor came near with a needle for an injection, Ethan's demeanor would switch wildly. Sometimes a look of pure terror, eyes wide, shrinking back, but often a flash of fierce anger. A deep, menacing voice. The old man's voice again, or something similar. Spitting threats. You give me pain now, you'll feel it tenfold. Get away from me. He'd watch them with intense, burning eyes. They had to be careful, as he seemed capable of lashing out if provoked. One afternoon, Sarah was sitting by his bedside. Ethan was lying down, looking weak. Suddenly, he shot up from the bed, leapt onto the small table near the window. There was a ceiling fan on, spinning away gently. In one fluid, impossible motion, Ethan reached up, stopped the spinning blades with his bare hand, which should have hurt him immensely, but he didn't even flinch. And then, with a grunt, he twisted the solid metal blade as if it were a piece of paper, crumpling it completely out of shape. Sarah gasped in terror, but just as quickly the strength seemed to drain out of him. He stumbled back onto the bed, looking dazed and weak again, like nothing had happened. His personality shifts became more frequent, more pronounced. One moment, he'd be the angry, threatening entity. The next, a terrified child begging his mother, "Mom, take me home. Why am I here? They bother me. Let's go home now, please." Then, he'd become withdrawn, sitting silently, answering questions with monosyllables. Sometimes, that unnerving, girlish quality would surface. One doctor tried to give him an injection, and as he leaned in, Ethan lashed out with his leg, kicking the doctor square in the chest, sending him staggering across the room. After that, they had to restrain him, tying his wrists and ankles to the bed with soft restraints, before they could safely administer medication. Sarah, seeing all this, utterly distraught, called Jake. She explained everything: the voices, the behavior, the fan incident, the confinement. Jake and a couple of the other friends rushed to the hospital. They found Ethan strapped to the bed, occasionally pulling at the restraints, his eyes vacant or darting nervously. Jake, Mark, the friend with the past experience, and 2 others were there. As they approached the bed, Ethan looked up. He seemed to recognize Jake and the other 2 friends. He even managed a weak smile for them, reaching out a hand as they approached. They shook his hand carefully. He briefly touched their heads, a gesture of blessing perhaps, before dropping his hand back to the bed. Then Mark stepped forward. As Mark came near, something in Ethan's eyes changed. The vacant look was replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. He recoiled violently against the restraints, screaming at Mark, his voice distorted and frantic. "Stay away, get back, I don't want you near me, go!" Mark, seeing this reaction, especially given his own history, understood instantly. This wasn't Ethan's illness. This was something else entirely. They sat with Sarah, who artfully recounted every disturbing detail, from the baby crying to the twisted fan blade. They knew this was beyond conventional medicine. It was Mark who spoke up. "Look," he said, his voice steady despite the gravity. "This isn't something doctors can fix. I've seen things like this before. Not exactly, but the signs are there. I know someone, a spiritual medium, Mr. Abernathy. He's helped people with things like this. I'll call him. He needs to see Ethan." They agreed immediately. Mark made the call, and Mr. Abernathy, a calm, composed older gentleman, arrived at the hospital room shortly after. The moment Mr. Abernathy stepped across the threshold, Ethan, still restrained on the bed, let out a guttural shriek, thrashing violently. "Get out! Leave! You don't belong here! Go away!" he roared, his eyes blazing with unnatural fury, red-rimmed and wide. The different voices seemed to overlap and blend in his desperate cries. Mr. Abernathy remained perfectly calm. He didn't speak to Ethan directly. He simply walked further into the room, stood by the bed, and began to recite, not loudly, but with quiet authority, what sounded like sacred verses. As he spoke, the reaction from Ethan intensified. The voices within him raged, trying to shout over Abernathy's recitation. "Leave him. He's ours now. You can't have him. Go away. You'll regret this. He came to us. He belongs to the cemetery. Get out." The voices shifted, sometimes deep and gravelly, sometimes high and shrieking, sometimes a low growl, but the message was always the same: defiance and possession. Mr. Abernathy didn't falter. He kept reciting, his voice steady and unwavering. He continued for several minutes, the room filled with the unsettling cacophony of the spiritualist's calm chanting and the tormented howls from Ethan's body. Slowly, the struggle seemed to lessen. Ethan's thrashing subsided. The furious voices became weaker, interspersed with gasps and whimpers. Finally, with a last, ragged breath, Ethan slumped back onto the bed, unconscious. Mr. Abernathy stopped reciting. He took a length of simple thread from his pocket and tied it gently around Ethan's wrist. He then turned to Sarah, Emily, and the friends. "All right," he said quietly. "He is stable for now. The inhabitants are suppressed." He looked at them. "Who is family here?" Sarah and Emily stepped forward. Jake and the others identified themselves as friends. "Right," Mr. Abernathy said. "One member of the immediate family should stay here with him, and anyone else who wishes to, but absolute silence must be maintained. No talking, no sudden movements. The rest can step outside for a moment." Jake and another friend went outside. Sarah, Emily, and Mark remained. Mr. Abernathy looked at Emily. "Young lady," he said gently, "could you step forward, please, and extend your index finger?" Puzzled but trusting, Emily did as he asked. Mr. Abernathy lightly touched her fingertip. "Now," he instructed, "close your eyes, completely relax, breathe deeply." Emily closed her eyes, and as Mr. Abernathy maintained contact with her finger, a vision flooded her mind, as clear and vivid as watching a film. She saw Ethan, on that specific night, walking through the gates of old Elmwood Cemetery. She saw him wandering among the headstones. And then, to her horror, she saw them. Not just one or two, but dozens. Dark, spectral shapes, translucent figures rising from the ground around him, emerging from behind trees and monuments. There were men, women, even the faint outlines of children. She saw them swirling around him, drawn to him. Drawn, she realized with a sickening certainty, by his presence, perhaps by the cologne he wore, or just by the sheer audacity of a living soul intruding on their domain at such an hour. She saw them following him, clinging to him like shadows, all the way out of the cemetery gates and back towards the living world, right up to the front door of their house in Chicago. Emily gasped, tears welling up, her eyes still shut. "Oh God," she whispered. They followed him. There are so many of them." Mr. Abernathy's voice was quiet but firm. "Yes, they did. You saw correctly. There are 45 distinct presences that attached themselves to him that night from that place." Sarah gasped beside her. 45. Mr. Abernathy explained that Ethan's casual intrusion, perhaps amplified by his scent, or just sheer vulnerability in that specific location at that hour, had essentially invited a large number of residual energies or entities to latch on to him. They were now inhabiting him, fighting for control, causing the chaos. Can you help him?" Sarah pleaded, her voice trembling. "Yes," Mr. Abernathy said. "There is a way. It requires discipline and commitment from Ethan. He has essentially brought them back with him, and they must be carefully and deliberately removed." He then explained the process. He would write a specific sacred text, an incantation, on a piece of paper. Ethan would need to do this ritual for 45 consecutive nights. Each night he must sit alone, in complete darkness. It could be a dark room or even outside in darkness, but it must be dark, and he must be alone. He was to light a single candle or a small lamp. By the light of that flame, he was to read the text written on the paper. After reading it, he was to take the same piece of paper and carefully burn it completely using the candle flame. Each time he performs this ritual correctly, Mr. Abernathy explained, one of the presences will be compelled to leave him. After 45 nights, 45 entities will be gone. He must not miss a single night. The process must be completed. When Ethan finally woke up later, groggy but calmer, Sarah, Emily, and Jake carefully explained everything that had happened. The hospital behavior, Mr. Abernathy's visit, Emily's vision. Ethan listened, his eyes wide with shock and dawning comprehension. He had never told them about going to the graveyard. When Emily mentioned seeing it in her vision, he knew it was true. He looked terrified, but also deeply remorseful. I didn't know," he whispered. I was curious. I never did." "Hot. I am so sorry for putting you all through this." They gave him Mr. Abernathy's instructions. and the first piece of paper with the sacred text. Despite his fear, Ethan was determined to follow through. When he was discharged from the hospital, still weak but mentally present, he began the ritual. For 45 nights, without fail, Ethan sat alone in his darkened room. He lit the small candle, the only source of light in the oppressive gloom. He read the words on the paper, feeling a strange mix of fear and resolve. Then he watched the flame consume the paper, turning it to ash. Each night he felt a subtle shift within him, a sense of something heavy lifting, a faint pressure easing. It wasn't dramatic, but it was there. And after the 45th night, as the last piece of paper turned to ash, he felt different, lighter, like a great weight had been removed. He was completely himself again. The strange voices in his room stopped. His personality was stable. He was healthy, vibrant, the well-built young man he was before. Ethan is perfectly fine today. He's back to his normal life, but he's not the skeptic he once was. And let me tell you, you couldn't pay him enough to go anywhere near a cemetery after dark ever again. So there you have it. A story about curiosity leading to something rather nasty indeed. Was it really 45 separate entities? Or some profound psychological reaction triggered by the environment, manifesting as separate voices and behaviors? If it was just his mind, how did Mr. Abernathy's ritual and Emily's vision fit in? Why did that specific process work? We don't have all the answers, but the moral of the story, passed down from Jake, from Ethan, and frankly, just good common sense. Leave places like old cemeteries to their peace, especially when the sun's gone down. Some doors are best left unopened. Some curiosities are best left unsatisfied. You never know what might decide to follow you home.